Australia unveils record $37 billion defense budget. Australia will spend a record 55.7 billion Australian dollars, US $36.8 billion, on defense during the next fiscal year, according to budget documents unveiled May 14th. The figure equates to 2.02% of gross domestic product and represents a 6.3% increase from last year. Australia's National Defence Strategy, released last month, promised a significant increase in spending, but that does not start until 2027 to 2028, when defence expenditure is slated to reach about 67.4 billion Australian dollars. Beyond that, the government still has a ways to go to hit its defence spending goal of 100 billion Australian dollars by 2033 to 2034, which would be 2.3% of GDP. In this latest budget release for the 2024 to 2025 time frame, the government has set aside 16.7 billion Australian dollars for equipment acquisitions in the coming fiscal year, plus another 17.2 billion Australian dollars to sustain existing assets. The Navy receives a significant allocation of 10.7 billion Australian dollars. Nuclear-powered submarines are starting to consume an enormous portion of the budget as the trilateral AUKUS agreement progresses. Notably, spending on nuclear submarines will snowball from last year's 475 million Australian dollars to 2.8 billion Australian dollars in the coming year, eventually reaching 4.97 billion Australian dollars in 2027 to 2028. By comparison, 600-class frigates and 6 Air-class offshore patrol vessels are to receive 813 million Australian dollars and 587 million Australian dollars, respectively. The budget makes no reference to 11 new general-purpose frigates, which the government is expected to select next year. The Army is promised 11.8 billion Australian dollars as it procures expensive assets such as Boxer armored vehicles, Redback infantry fighting vehicles, Huntsman self-propelled howitzers, high-mobility artillery rocket systems, M1A2 Abrams tanks, National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile Systems, and UH-60M Black Hawk and AH-64E Apache helicopters. The Air Force will receive $9 Australian dollars and 50 cents billion, with F-35A fighter jets being its single most expensive acquisition. 9 of 72 fighters remain undelivered. Budget figures also revealed that the arrival of 4 MC-55A Peregrine electronic warfare aircraft is running 2 years behind schedule. The Australian Signals Directorate, which conducts foreign signals intelligence, cybersecurity and offensive cyber operations, will receive 2.7 billion Australian dollars. A further 1 billion Australian dollars is allocated to defense intelligence. Australian military procurements are handled by the Capability Acquisition and Sustainment Group. The government in 2021 formed the Guided Weapons and Explosive Ordnance Enterprise to promote the sovereign production of missiles and munitions. Together, they will receive 1.3 billion Australian dollars in the next fiscal year. For its part, Ukraine garnered 144.3 million Australian dollars in military aid for the year ahead as it continues its fight against the Russian invasion. Meanwhile, the Defense Department wants 63,597 uniformed personnel and 19,127 civilian employees in the year ahead. The Australian Defence Force, or ADF, is currently made up of about 58,600 uniformed personnel. The department is made up of about 18,000 civilian employees. The Department of Defense is forecasting to be below the required ADF full-time workforce for 2024 to 25 due to high separation rates and lower than expected achievement of recruitment targets over recent years, the budget document stated. The new budget also noted that last year's spending on personnel costs surpassed estimates by 1 billion Australian dollars because of increased living costs. About 16.7 billion Australian dollars is to be spent on the workforce this coming fiscal year. Approximately 6.6 billion Australian dollar will go toward maintaining the security and condition of Defense Department property. Before the budget was announced, Defense Industry Minister Pat Conroy promised between 14 billion Australian dollars and 18 billion Australian dollars would go to upgrading and hardening military bases in Northern Australia over the next decade. The Northern Territory is critical to the defense of the nation, not just in defending Australia, but projecting power out into our region against any potential adversary, Conroy said. The 2024 National Defense Strategy, released last month, cited increasing strategic competition between China and Australian ally the United States, adding that the former seeks to change the current regional balance in its favor. China has employed coercive tactics in pursuit of its strategic objectives, including forceful handling of territorial disputes and unsafe intercepts of vessels and aircraft operating in international waters and airspace, the document stated. Jennifer Parker, an expert associate at the Australian National University, warned that despite promised increases in defense spending, there's a significant gap in ADF capability over the next 10, maybe 15 years. This gap coincides with the most strategically unstable geopolitical situation since World War II.